The drums began at dusk, deep and triumphant, shaking the rafters of Shadowfang Hall while servants braided moon ivy into Ivy Nightshade's hair and pinned silver combs against her temples. By law, by blood, and by every story she had been fed since she first shifted at 12, this was the night she would stand at Cain Shadowfang's side and be named Luna. Those same lessons had included the oldest emergency appeal, blood memory right before neutral witnesses, spoken of in hushed tones because the right could expose truth or kill the caller where she stood. Her bridal silk, white-edged in black, whispered around her ankles as she walked toward the central fire pit. She kept her chin level, though her wolf was a muffled ache under her ribs, distant for months, as if listening from the bottom of a well. Pack voices rose when she entered. Some smiled, most measured. Cain waited on the stone dais in ceremonial black, broad-shouldered, handsome in the merciless way winter is handsome. As he turned, a sliver of black iron flashed beneath his high collar, his command torque, etched with old pack control runes he wore during discipline hearings and never in public celebration. His mouth curved, but not warmly. Elder Mar lifted the carved bone staff and called for silence. "Tonight," the elder intoned, "we seal mate bond and crown our Luna." Ivy stepped forward with her palms open. "Cain." He did not take her hands. Instead, he turned slowly so the whole pack could see his face. "I reject you," he said. The words did not sound real. They cracked through her skull without meaning, like hearing a foreign tongue. Then the hall inhaled as one body. Cain's voice sharpened. "You are Baron of Wolf, Ivy Nightshade, a hollow she-beast, unfit for my line, unfit for Luna's seat." A hot roar filled her ears. "That isn't true," she said, too softly. She tried again, louder. "Our bond is rot." He smiled then, all teeth. "And tonight we cleanse it." Two enforcers seized her elbows before she could step back. Ivy thrashed, bridal silk tearing under rough hands. "Let go of me." She looked to the circle of elders, to wolves who had eaten at her table since childhood. Not one moved. The pack healer, Mother Sable, approached carrying a ceremonial cup engraved with wolves running beneath a full moon. The liquid inside was pearl pale and thick. Cleansing tonic, they called it at failed hand fastings. Bitter herbs, usually. Harmless, usually. Ivy smelled copper under the mint. "No," she whispered. "No, don't." Cain gripped her jaw. His fingers dug hard enough to bruise. "Be grateful I grant you ritual mercy." She jerked, but an enforcer wrenched her head back. The rim of the cup crushed against her lips. Liquid flooded her mouth, sour and metallic, burning down her throat in a hot, slick line. She gagged, coughed, choked half of it out onto her bodice. Cain slapped her, open-handed, and hissed in her ear, "Swallow." She did, because she needed air. The hall watched, silent except for the fire popping and her own ragged retching. Almost immediately, pain bloomed low in her belly, then shot up her spine in jagged white strikes. She folded, retching again, hands shaking so violently she could not wipe her mouth. Her wolf, already dim, gave a thin cry in her mind and went quieter. Mother Sable clicked her tongue. "See? No wolf strength to hold even a cleansing draft." Cain released her like refuse, brand her faithless, cast her out before moonrise. Ivy lifted her head, hair falling loose, and stared at him through tears she refused to let drop. Why? For one breath she thought she saw something like annoyance, not guilt, cross his face. Because weakness is contagious. An enforcer heated the iron while she knelt on the stone, half blind with poison and humiliation. Another yanked the bronze wedding torque from her throat, twisted silver and moonstone chips, the one piece of the ceremony that had been hers, and tossed it clattering onto the dais at Cain's feet. He did not look at it. The brand hissed when it kissed her shoulder blade through torn silk. The smell of burned skin slammed into her. She screamed once, then bit it back hard enough to taste blood. Pack children watched from behind their mother's skirts. A few looked frightened. Most looked curious. They dragged her down the steps and threw her into the mud outside the hall. Rain had started. Cold needles against scorched skin. Someone tossed her a travel cloak with a slit cut down the seam. Someone else spat near her hand. "Rogue by dawn," one guard said, "dead by next moon." The heavy gates groaned shut behind her. Ivy knelt in the dark with blood and rain mixing at her knees, poison crawling through her veins like live wire. She could still hear music beginning again inside. A rejection feast. For a moment she wanted to crawl back and scratch at the gates until her nails tore off. Demand to be heard, demand to be seen. Then laughter drifted over the wall, bright and careless, and something in her finally broke cleanly. She pushed herself up and walked. By midnight the pain had settled into waves, cramping, then stabbing, then a numb chill that left her fingers wooden. She followed deer tracks through pine and shale, avoiding patrol routes she knew by memory. Every few miles she doubled over and dry heaved. The moon climbed and hid behind clouds. Her brand throbbed with each heartbeat. Her mate bond, once a taut silver thread from breastbone to horizon, felt diseased now, blackening from the inside out. Near dawn she crawled beneath a fallen cedar and slept for less than an hour. She woke to voices. 3 Shadowfang scouts stood 20 paces away, cloaks dripping, blades at their hips. They had not seen her yet. Ivy pressed herself flat into wet needles, hardly breathing. "Alpha wants proof," one said. "Healer says if she lasts 2 days, the draft failed." "It won't fail," another answered. "That mix hollows a wolf to ash." The third snorted. "Then why send us?" "Because Kane doesn't like loose ends." Their laughter was low and bored. Ivy's stomach dropped so hard she thought she would vomit again. This had never been rejection alone. It was an execution stretched across miles, so no blood stained their hall. She touched the bark until splinters bit her palm, grounding herself in the small, sharp pain. If she stayed hidden, they would find her scent once the rain eased. If she ran toward border woods, they could track her by habit. East lay ravines. West lay the old iron road, little used since the royal caravans moved to the high pass. South was Crown territory. 10 leagues if she cut through marsh and stone and did not collapse first. The scouts moved off, still talking. Ivy counted to 50, then crawled backward like prey. When she could stand, she ran south. The forest changed as the day wore on, pines giving way to scrub oak and thorn. Poison fever blurred the edges of everything. She stumbled into a stream and drank greedily until cramps knifed through her gut. At sunset, she found a hunter's shrine built into a cliff wall and huddled inside, shivering. Her wolf was nearly silent now. Once, around midnight, she tried to shift for speed, and nothing happened except a burst of agony that left her biting her sleeve to keep from screaming. By the second day, rain turned to storm. Wind drove needles of sleet into her face. She lost the trail twice and had to circle by scent, which came and went in dizzy bursts. Her left leg dragged, her vision narrowed, tunnel dark around a pale center. Just after dusk, she saw the royal road, broad, packed, lined with boundary stones carved with the Valewood crest. Relief hit so hard her knees buckled. She half laughed, half sobbed, then heard wheels and shouted commands through the storm. Caravan. Torchlight wavered through rain sheets, gold smears in the dark. If she stayed hidden, she might die quietly under a bush before sunrise. If she stepped out, they might kill her as rogue trespass. Ivy touched the brand on her back, then the burned hollow where her bond had been, and chose. She staggered into the center of the road and raised one shaking hand. Horses screamed, wheels locked. Someone shouted, "Contact! Female! Unknown!" She tried to speak, "Help!" But her tongue felt huge and useless. The world tilted. She saw armored wolves fanning out, spears lowered, cloaks snapping in the wind. One rider dismounted in a single fluid motion, tall and broad in dark leather marked with a captain's braid. "Easy," he said, voice cutting through storm. He crouched, sniffed once, and swore under his breath. "Gods! She's poisoned." "Rogue trick?" another guard called. "Look at her." The captain stripped off his own cloak and wrapped it around Ivy's shoulders. No one fakes bond burn. He glanced at the lead carriage where a royal standard whipped. "Signal the king. We take her in." Ivy flinched at the word king, old fear and new panic tangling. "No chains," she croaked. The captain's expression shifted, unexpectedly gentle. "Protocol wards only if His Majesty insists. You have my word." She wanted to ask his name, to ask if words still meant anything, but darkness surged up from her feet and swallowed the road. She surfaced to heat, bitter herbs, and the steady drip of water from stone channels. Her body felt flayed. Bands of light from ward sigils glowed around the bed frame, pale blue and humming, restraint magic tuned to prevent sudden shift. Her wrists were free. Her ankles, too. No iron. A physician in gray leaned over her, pinching her eyelid open. "Still febrile? Pupil lag. If the wolf core doesn't relight, we should consider ending intervention." "Consider leaving," said a male voice from the shadows, low and edged like drawn steel. The physician blanched. "Your Majesty, I only meant—" "Out." The room emptied in heartbeats. Boots crossed stone, then stopped beside her cot. Ivy forced her eyes wider. He sat in a plain wooden chair, elbows on knees, sleeves rolled, as if he had been there for hours and forgotten comfort existed. Alpha King Jasper Valewood looked younger than rumor and far more dangerous. Dark hair tied at his nape, jaw rough with stubble, scar cutting through one eyebrow, gold eyes fixed on her throat where pulse fluttered frantic and thin. A slate lay open on his lap, marks scored in neat columns. "You're counting," Ivy rasped. He held up the slate slightly. "Breaks in rhythm. Every seventh beat stutters." His gaze met hers. "You were dead for 12 breaths on the road." She tried to push up. Pain detonated behind her eyes. He moved instantly, one hand at her shoulder, not forcing, only bracing. Heat poured off him in waves. His scent hit a moment later, cedar, rain, iron, and something deep inside her, something she had buried with her own hands, jolted awake. Jasper leaned closer, likely to check her pupils again. The world snapped. Lightning ripped low through her ribs, striking a chain buried in ice. Searing heat raced up her spine, every poisoned thread in her torn bond flaring in violent answer. Ivy gasped, arching despite the pain, fingers clawing at blankets. For one impossible heartbeat, she heard her wolf, not whole, not strong, but real, snarl from the dark. Jasper froze as if a blade had touched his throat. His irises flooded molten gold. The hand on her shoulder trembled once. "Mine," he whispered, rough and stunned, like the word had been dragged out of him against his will. Terror and relief crashed together so hard she could not separate them. She stared at the ruthless king looming over her bed, at the shock on his face that matched her own, and understood that surviving the poison had only carried her to a different edge of danger. Ivy's lips parted on a ragged breath. "No." The word came out raw, scraped thin by fever and terror, but it made Jasper flinch as if she had struck him. He pulled his hand back from her shoulder and stood so fast the chair legs shrieked against stone. The pale blue ward sigils around her bed frame flickered, sensing the spike in alpha scent flooding the room. For a second he simply stared at her, chest rising once, sharply, then again, controlled, like a man bracing under a blow no one else could see. Ivy pressed herself into the mattress, fingers tangled in rough wool blankets. The heat under her skin was unbearable now, racing through her bloodstream in bright, stinging threads that followed the old wounds of her poisoned bond. Every place that had gone numb after the cleansing draft now burned. Her brand throbbed at her shoulder blade. Her pulse kicked hard, then stuttered exactly where he had marked it on his slate. Somewhere deep below the pain, her wolf shifted in the dark and lifted her head. Not fully, not safely, but awake enough to feel him. Don't, Ivy whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant don't touch me, don't claim me, or don't let this be real. Jasper's jaw flexed. I am not claiming anything. His voice had dropped into a rough register she felt in her ribs more than heard. He took one measured step back from the cot, then another, putting deliberate distance between them until he stood beyond arm's reach. Gold still bled through his irises, molten and predatory, but he kept his hands open at his sides where she could see them. I spoke out of instinct, he said, not law. Ivy tried to laugh and only coughed. Kings don't get instincts. Kings get territories. Then tonight, he said, I am only a wolf who got blindsided. The answer was so unadorned it made her blink. She dragged air into lungs that felt too small and held his gaze because looking away felt worse. Locked eye contact pinned her in place. His shock, her panic, the ugly flicker of relief she hated in herself. She had spent 2 days running from a bond that had been turned against her. Now the pull to him was unmistakable. Warmth under the terror, electricity under the nausea, a low, aching tether that tightened when he breathed and strained when he moved farther away. Her body remembered him. Her mind rebelled. I had a mate, she said, each word clipped. He poisoned me in front of my pack. Jasper's nostrils flared, scenting the rage in her sweat, the rot of the old toxin. Maybe the ghost of Cain still lodged in her ruined bond threads. You had a bond weaponized against you, he said. That is not the same thing. The certainty in his tone cracked something sharp inside her. You don't get to define what happened to me. No. He swallowed once, hard enough she saw the movement in his throat. I don't, but I can refuse to repeat it. Silence stretched between them, humming with ward light and fever heat. Rain rattled somewhere high above, muted through thick palace stone. Ivy's fingers shook. She clenched them anyway, refusing to let him see how badly. What happens now? She asked. Jasper glanced toward the door, then back to her. Now I call witnesses. A king does not stand alone in a room with a newly recognized mate unless she asks it. The word mate struck like another bolt through her chest. She winced. Her wolf gave a rough, startled sound and then retreated a fraction, not gone, only wary. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Ivy. He said her name carefully, as if testing where it hurt. I can scent poison still active in your blood. The recognition surge may have forced some dormant pathways open. That can help. It can also kill you if your body spikes again. I need physician oversight in here before your heart tears itself apart. She believed him. She hated that she believed him. And if I say no? Then I stay outside the door, he said. And they come in anyway, because your survival outranks my pride. A tremor rolled through her from spine to teeth. She nodded once, tiny, and closed her eyes when he turned to the door and barked for the medical team. Boots pounded immediately, no hesitation, as if they had been waiting just beyond earshot. When she opened her eyes again, 3 healers entered with bowls, tinctures, linen wraps, and fear written plain across their faces. The physician in gray from before led them, mouth tight. He bowed to Jasper first, then to Ivy, lower than protocol required for a patient cast out as rogue. Word traveled quickly in palaces. Your Majesty, he said, we should reinforce sedation and keep distance until the bond surge stabilizes. Do your work, Jasper replied. No restraints unless she requests them or actively harms herself. The physician's gaze flicked to Ivy's shaking hands, to her fever-bright eyes, to the ward sigils already active. Seizures are likely. Then treat the seizures, Jasper said. A younger healer stepped forward with a cup that smelled of willow bark and bitter root. Ivy recoiled on reflex, throat closing, memories of Mother Sable's ceremonial cup slamming into her hard enough to blur the room. Her pulse spiked. The healer froze. Jasper's voice cut through the panic, low and precise. Show her every ingredient. The healer startled, then set the cup down, opening each packet one by one on a tray. Dried bark, powdered charcoal, crushed fennel, salt. No metallic tang, no copper beneath mint. Ivy forced herself to inhale each scent, cataloging, checking. Her hands still trembled when she accepted the dose, but she swallowed by choice, not force, and that mattered so fiercely she almost wept. She did not. The first convulsion hit less than an hour later. It started in her calves and climbed fast, locking muscle after muscle until her back arched off the cot and her jaw snapped shut hard enough to click teeth. Someone shouted for straps. Another voice said, "Hold her down." Hands reached. "Out!" Jasper growled. The command cracked like thunder. The hands vanished. Footsteps retreated in chaos, doors banged, and then it was only Ivy, the king, and the blue hum of ward light pulsing against stone. She could not breathe, could not unclench. Her body was a trap closing inward. She made a broken sound and tried to bite her own tongue to anchor herself before the pain swallowed everything. Jasper dropped to the floor beside the cot, knees hitting stone. "Not that," he said sharply. "Take mine." He shoved his right hand between her teeth just as the next spasm slammed through. Ivy clamped down on instinct. Blood flooded her mouth, hot and immediate, threaded with cedar and iron. He did not pull away. His left hand braced her shoulder without pinning. "Good," he said, breathing hard but steady. "Ground there. Bite through me, not yourself." Her vision whited out. The seizure rolled and rolled, endless, while his voice kept threading through it. Calm, rhythmic, impossible. Numbers first. 7 breaths in, 7 out. Then inventory. Stone wall, wool blanket, cedar oil, rain. Then, absurdly, recitation from the slate he had been using to track her pulse. Supply ledger, East Granary, he said, as if reading a bedtime tale to a child who had never trusted stories. 32 sacks winter barley damaged by floodwater. 14 recoverable after drying. 9 diverted to border barracks. Clerk notation. Rats. Likely false entry to hide theft. Another convulsion bent her sideways. She screamed against his hand. He kept reading. Second entry. Broken axle on West Old Iron Road. Replacement requisition denied twice. Margin note from quartermaster. If denied again, cart teams will die by spring thaw. Somewhere in the middle of pain and blood and fury, Ivy understood what he was doing. She had mumbled in delirium earlier. Numbers are easier than pity. And he had listened. She gripped his wrist with both hands and let the cadence pull her through the next wave. Not comfort, not tenderness, structure, facts. Things that could be counted when trust could not. Hours blurred. Seizure, lull, seizure again. Each time he sent the healers out when they rushed too close, then called them back the instant medication or cooling cloths were needed, never letting one become the other. Each time he offered his hand before she could break herself. By the 4th round, his knuckles were torn open, teeth marks crescent deep, blood drying dark at his cuff. He asked for no thanks. He did not call her brave. He did not tell her to be calm. Near dawn, the convulsions eased into shudders. Ivy collapsed sideways, cheek against the blanket, shaking from depletion. Jasper finally withdrew his hand and wrapped it in clean linen one-handed, movements economical from old battlefield habit. He stayed seated on the floor, back against the cot frame, as if standing would cost more than he intended to pay. "You should sleep, Your Majesty," Ivy murmured, half delirious. "I have," he said, intermittently, in wars. A strangled laugh escaped her before she could stop it. His mouth twitched, almost a smile, then flattened. She watched him through heavy lids, noting details she had missed in terror. The scar through one eyebrow, the stubble shadowing his jaw, the line of old bite marks along his forearm, pale and precise. Younger than rumor? Yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But his danger pointed outward unless invited in. "Why?" she asked, voice barely sound. "You owe me nothing." His gaze stayed on the ward sigils, not her face. "Because power used without restraint is just another weapon. You've had enough of those pointed at you." The answer settled over her like a blanket warmer than wool. She did not trust it yet. She did not trust herself for wanting to. But when sleep dragged her under, it was to the sound of his voice reading dull columns of grain, iron, and winter salt, as if they were sacred text. And for the first time since Shadowfang Hall, she slept without dreaming of Kane's hand on her jaw. 3 days later, Ivy walked into the West Dining Hall under her own power. Not steadily, not gracefully, but upright, with her moon ivy braid gone and her dark hair falling loose over a simple black dress borrowed from palace stores. The brand at her shoulder blade still burned when cloth touched it. Her wolf rose and receded in uncertain pulses, like a creature learning to breathe after burial. The court watched her enter as if she were a new species. The hall itself was all carved pillars and long marble tables veined silver under chandelier light. Through the western arch, she could see the court grounds and the ancient oath stone at their center, a weathered monolith where moon court adjudications were bound under open sky. Nobles filled the benches by rank, allied alphas in formal coats, counselors in deep greens and slate, envoys from border packs with polished smiles and sharp eyes. Jasper sat at the raised king's table, Valewood crest worked in iron behind his chair. He wore no crown, only a black jacket and a knife at his hip. That somehow looked more dangerous. He had told her she could eat privately. She had chosen this instead. If they were going to stare, let them stare while she stood. A steward announced her by name and titleless lineage. Murmurs rippled anyway. "Nightshade?" someone whispered. "The discarded bride." "Shadowfang Castoff," another said, not quietly enough. Ivy took the seat Jasper had left open at his right. She kept her chin level and reached for bread because her hands needed a task. Across from her, 3 noble alphas from northern territories leaned toward one another over silver goblets, all polished teeth. The oldest of them, broad, white-haired, rings on every finger, lifted his cup in mock salute. "To royal charity," he said. "May we all be granted a throne when our packs throw us away." Laughter broke in pockets around the hall, nervous and mean. Ivy felt the old reflex rise. Go still, go small, survive the blow by pretending it missed. Her fingers tightened on the bread until crust cracked. Another alpha, younger and fox-faced, added, "Careful, Lord Varric. If she's truly barren of wolf, perhaps she is harmless. If not, we might all wake poisoned." The third made a show of sniffing. "I smell Shadowfang on her still. Hard to wash out betrayal." The goblet struck marble like a hammer. The crack rang through the chamber, sharp enough to silence cutlery and speech alike. Jasper stood, shards of silver stem and red wine at his feet, hands still clenched from the blow. A hairline fracture spread across the table edge where he had hit. When he spoke, his voice carried to the far arches without needing volume. "King's protection," he said. The formal words dropped into the room like law made physical. Every noble stiffened. Stewards bowed their heads. Guards along the walls moved one pace forward, spears grounded in unison. Jasper's gold eyes fixed on the three alphas. Hear me once. Any insult, threat, or slander directed at Ivy Nightshade from this moment constitutes treason against my crown. Lord Varric paled beneath his beard. Your Majesty, surely banter at table does not— Treason, Jasper repeated. Shall I have the scribe carve it larger? No one spoke. Ivy sat very still, pulse loud in her ears. She had expected strategy from him, maybe even protection in private. Not this. Not a public line drawn in iron where all could witness. Not his reputation and authority spent without hesitation on a woman he had known less than a week. A herald rushed in before the silence could settle, cloak rain-spattered despite clear skies. He knelt at the threshold and held up a sealed tube marked with Shadowfang wax. Message at gate, Your Majesty, delivered by emissaries under truce demand. The hall tensed as one body. Jasper nodded once. Read. The herald broke the seal, eyes scanning quickly before his mouth tightened. From Alpha Cain Shadowfang to Alpha King Jasper Valewood. By Treaty Clause 19, Subsection 3, rejected mates remain pack property pending nullification rights. Ivy Nightshade fled lawful sentence and must be returned to Shadowfang custody immediately. Refusal will be treated as harboring a rogue and breach of border accord. A hiss of whispers surged. Ivy's stomach dropped cold. She knew Cain's handwriting even from across a room, knew the shape of his legal traps, his habit of calling cruelty law. Jasper held out his hand. Bring it. He read the letter once, expression carved from stone, then passed it to his chancellor without looking away from the hall. Forgery, he said. Clause 19 has no subsection 3. The chancellor blanched as he skimmed. Confirmed, Majesty. This text is altered. As expected. Jasper turned to the captain who had found Ivy on the road, now posted by the eastern pillar. Escort the emissaries inside. Boots thundered. Moments later, 2 Shadowfang representatives were marched in under guard, both in gray travel cloaks, both visibly startled by the full court assembled. They knelt with rigid reluctance. The taller emissary lifted his chin. By Shadowfang right, we demand return of our pack property. Property. Ivy's wolf snapped awake hard enough to make her teeth ache. She tasted blood where she had bitten her cheek. The room tilted toward violence. Jasper descended from the dais one measured step at a time until he stood between the emissaries and Ivy. He did not look back to check if she was behind him. He knew. She is under my law now, he said. The taller emissary sneered. Then you admit theft. Jasper smiled without warmth. Then, in one fluid movement so old and formal it sucked air from the hall, he bared throat and fangs in challenge. The king's own body offered as stake and warning both. Gasps broke around the tables. Even the 3 mocking alphas went rigid. Touch her, Jasper said softly, and lose your hands. The words were not shouted. They did not need to be. The emissary's bravado cracked. Sweat beaded at his temple. He dropped his gaze first, then his head, posture collapsing into submission he could not hide. Message delivered, he muttered. Message answered, Jasper replied. He straightened, the challenge posture closing like a blade sheathed. You will leave by the north gate under escort. If Shadowfang crosses my border without summons again, I will treat it as hostile incursion. The emissaries were hauled out, truce intact only because Jasper allowed it. Sound returned in fragments, chairs creaking, breath releasing, scribes scratching furious notes. Ivy realized her hands were no longer shaking. She stared at Jasper's back as he climbed the dais, as if seeing the map of him anew. Ruthless, yes. Feared for good reason. But he had not used that fear to cage her. He had used it like a wall she could choose to stand behind. He resumed his seat and, after a beat, turned slightly toward her. "You are pale," he said, voice pitched for her alone. "Do you need to leave?" Ivy looked at the cracked marble where his goblet had shattered, at the nobles studiously avoiding her eyes now, at the doorway where Shadowfang's men had vanished empty-handed. "No," she said, surprising herself with how steady it sounded. "I think I need to stay." Something eased in his face, fleeting as moonlight over water. He signaled for a fresh cup, then paused before it reached him and set it, untouched, by her plate instead. An offering. A choice. Ivy lifted the goblet, sniffed it, and drank because she wanted to, while the whole court watched and learned that she was not being dragged anywhere ever again. By the time the meal ended, the guard at her back felt less like a cage and more like a promise she might one day believe. The meal broke in ragged pockets of motion, nobles bowing too low, servants moving too quickly, everyone pretending they had not just watched a king offer his throat over one woman's right to remain free. Ivy stayed seated until the last scrape of chair legs faded. Only then did she set down her goblet and realize her palm had left a damp print on the stem. Jasper rose. "Chancellor, Captain, War Chamber, now." His tone cleared the hall faster than any shouted order. He looked at Ivy next, not commanding, only asking, "Can you walk?" She stood before she could doubt herself. Her knees trembled once, then locked. "Yes." "Come with me." The corridor outside the west dining hall smelled of rain blown through arrow slits and old stone cooling after torch heat. Their footsteps echoed in a disciplined rhythm, guards falling in behind at a distance that felt protective instead of closing. Ivy kept expecting someone to grab her elbow, to steer her where she did not choose, but no hand touched her. Inside the war chamber, a map of South Crown territory covered half the table, held flat by knives and carved bone weights. Colored pins marked trade routes, barracks, granaries, and border posts. Ivy saw the West Old Iron Road, the East Ravines, the high pass where the caravan had found her. Her stomach clenched. The captain who had lifted her from the mud placed 2 leather satchels on the table. "Taken from the emissaries before they crossed the inner gate, Majesty, hidden under grain invoices." The Chancellor cut the ties and spread parchment bundles in neat rows. His mouth tightened with every page. Copies of the altered treaty, seal stamps for 6 border packs, payment ledgers. He held one up with 2 fingers as if it stank. "Bribes." Jasper did not sit. "Read names. Redcliffe, Thornmere, Halfmark, Stonebarrow." The Chancellor swallowed. 2 more coded as initials. Could be false marks. "Could be cowards," Jasper said. Either way, they wanted witnesses to repeat a lie until it sounded like law. Ivy leaned closer despite herself. On one page, the script slanted in a familiar, elegant cruelty. Cain always wrote his loops too narrow, as if even ink had to obey him. Beneath legal phrases sat short instructions, sharp and practical. Delay Valewood patrols at East Granary Route. Spread rogue notice in market circles. Intercept healer supply trains if patient survives past first week. Patient? Not woman. Not mate. Not even name. She heard her own breath roughen. Jasper noticed immediately. "What is it?" She pointed. "That hand, it is Cain's, and this phrase." Her finger hovered over survives past first week. "He used it when he hunted injured wolves after training fights. He said weak things were only useful if they made examples." Silence pooled in the room. The younger healer from the infirmary was summoned, still in gray with ink on her sleeve. She studied another folded sheet and went pale. "Majesty, this is a compound chart." "Speak plain." "These ingredients match what was found in Lady Ivy's blood after intake. Not just poison. A staged bond toxin." She laid out the list. Bitter iron bark, winterglass resin, hollow root, and moon nettle ash. It kills slowly if untreated, but if repeatedly dosed, it does something worse. Jasper's voice dropped. What? It hollows the wolf response while keeping body function stable enough for ritual linkage. A vessel condition. Ivy stared at her. A vessel for what? The healer hesitated. For blood binding. Forced command architecture. If someone anchored a target in that state with old right circles, they could mimic mate authority and potentially claim through the target's bond signatures. The Chancellor blanched. An artificial royal claim. Jasper's hand flattened on the map so hard the table creaked. Gold flashed in his eyes, bright and lethal. He poisoned her publicly to destroy her standing, then meant to reclaim her as a legal object and use her body as a crown key. No one answered. They did not need to. Ivy felt cold from scalp to heel. Every humiliation at Shadowfang Hall rearranged itself into something planned, not impulsive. Cain had not rejected her in fury. He had staged an execution that left the corpse walking. The captain unfolded the final paper from the satchel. There is more. He handed it to Jasper. Jasper read once, expression flattening to stone. He passed it to Ivy without warning. The script was not Cain's this time. The strokes were heavy, medicinal, precise. Mother Sable. The note was brief. Initial dose accepted at hand fasting. Burn mark applied to reinforce exile narrative. Subject ran farther than projected. Secondary retrieval required before toxin collapse. Keep jaw restraint if conscious. She bites. Ivy's vision went white at the edges. She gripped the table to stay upright. Somewhere far away, someone said her name. Once. Then again. Low and steady. Jasper moved into her line of sight and crouched, so she had to look at him, not the page. Ivy. Breathe. She dragged air into lungs that felt nailed shut. In for 7, he said softly. Out for 7. She did it because numbers were easier than pity. When she could hear again, Jasper rose and turned to his officers. Seal the palace staff rolls. No one leaves, no one new enters without my signet. Triple checks at infirmary, kitchens, and water stores. Captain, I want covert riders to every border post before dawn. If Shadowfang raids again, I want teeth at every crossing. The captain slammed fist to chest. At once. Chancellor, Jasper continued, draft notice to allied alphas. Cain Shadowfang forged treaty law, attempted unlawful extraction under Crown protection, and is under formal accusation of blood right conspiracy. Attach copies. The Chancellor bowed, grim. Yes, Majesty. Jasper looked to Ivy last, and you do not spend one moment alone. She almost snapped that she was not a prisoner. The words died on her tongue when she remembered the note, the line about jaw restraint, and Mother Sable's tidy script discussing her like an herb pouch. Fine, she said, voice raw. But I choose who stays near me. Agreed. That single word struck harder than any vow. By first bell after midnight, the palace moved like a drawn bow. Messengers ran. Armor buckles rang. Scribes copied orders until their hands cramped. Ivy sat in a side alcove outside the war chamber while guards rotated in silent pairs. She should have been exhausted, but her blood felt wired, every sound too loud. Jasper emerged at last with the captain and 2 commanders. East Granary convoy leaves at dawn, he was saying. 9 wagons, double outriders. Keep them off the low marsh road. Majesty. The captain hesitated. If we reinforce east and north both, west barracks thin by 1/3. Then we thin with intention. Cain wants me split and blind. We give him split and watching. When the officers were gone, Jasper leaned against the stone beside Ivy. For a long moment neither spoke. You were right, she said finally, at dinner. This was never just rejection. No. His jaw tightened. It was strategy. She laughed once, a brittle sound. I trained for years to sit at Kane's right hand, to balance his pack books, to remember flood tallies and winter stores. 32 sacks damaged, 14 recoverable, 9 diverted. Numbers he ignored while he told me I was made to stand pretty and bear airs. Her fingers curled. He remembered every number that could cage me. Jasper watched her profile, not pushing. You are allowed to hate him. I know. She swallowed. I hate that he was patient enough to make me doubt myself first. A silence stretched. Not empty, only careful. At second bell, a courier arrived, mud-streaked and panting. Raid at the West Old Iron Road, Majesty. Supply carts burned. Attackers wore rogue wraps, but moved in pack formation. A second courier followed before the first had finished drinking. Disturbance near Northgate Market. Pamphlets posted naming Ivy Nightshade Oathbreaker and Fugitive, signed with copied crown seal. The Chancellor cursed under his breath. He is flooding every channel. Jasper took both reports. Any casualties? 2 drovers cut, 1 guard bitten. Contain rumors, Jasper ordered. Public notice at sunrise. Anyone distributing forged crown marks loses trade license and stands for fraud hearing. The courier bowed and ran. Ivy stood, anger and helplessness knotting together. He keeps forcing your hand because of me. Because of his own ambition, Jasper corrected. Do not carry his blame. It still lands on your people. He looked at her then, directly, gold eyes bright in the low torchlight. My people include you. The words struck low in her ribs where the snapped chain of their bond still burned and pulled. Attraction was the wrong word for what followed. It was hunger and panic and relief, all braided tight. She wanted to step closer. She wanted to bolt. Instead, she said, You barely know me. He huffed a humorless breath. I know you held your ground at a hall built to shred you. I know you drank only when it was your choice. I know you count while in pain and apologize for dangers you did not create. He paused. I know enough to stand. The corridor doors banged open. A guard entered, kneeling. Majesty, another matter. A scullery maid reported a missing staff token from the lower laundry, name listed as Alira Fenn. No one has seen her since midday. Jasper's expression sharpened. Show me her post assignments. The guard handed over a slate. Jasper scanned it and swore softly. Infirmary linens yesterday. Dining service tonight. Ivy's skin crawled. A sleeper. He nodded once. Probably watching routines. Maybe placing something. He looked at her with sudden intensity. From this moment, nothing crosses your lips or skin unless cleared by the younger healer or me. Not water, not soap. Nothing. Her mouth tasted metallic at the memory of the ceremonial cup. Understood. The palace settled into that false quiet that comes before a storm breaks. Near dawn, Ivy finally agreed to rest, not in the infirmary where the ceiling still held fever shadows, but in a small records room off Jasper's private study. Shelves climbed to the rafters, packed with ledgers and military rolls. The scent of ink and cedar soothed something raw in her. Jasper came in without entourage, carrying 2 mugs and a stack of old battle accounts tied in red string. He set the mugs down first so she could inspect them. Boiled willow bark tea. From my own kettle. She sniffed, waited, then drank. The warmth eased the ache in her throat. You brought ledgers, she said, eyeing the stack. He sat on the floor beside her chair like he had in the infirmary during her convulsions, long legs stretched, back against the wall. You said numbers were easier. A laugh escaped before she could stop it. I did. He opened the top ledger. Year of the Long Flood, 3rd campaign supply losses. 32 sacks winter barley damaged by floodwater, 14 recoverable after drying, 9 diverted to border barracks. Her eyes stung unexpectedly. You remembered. I remember what steadies you. The room was quiet except for his voice and distant guard steps. Ivy let her head tip back against wood, eyes half closed, and listened as he read columns and casualty ratios with the same calm cadence he had used while she shook on a cot and crushed his hand hard enough to bruise. At some point, her breathing matched his rhythm. When he paused to turn a page, she spoke into the dim. "Why were you in the infirmary yourself that first night? Kings do not count pulse breaks." He did not answer immediately. Then, still looking at the ledger, he said, "Because once I did not." She turned her head. "My younger sister was bond injured in a border ambush years ago. Healers told me to leave it to experts. I did. I attended counsel while her heart stuttered alone." His jaw flexed once. "By the time I returned, she was gone for 20 breaths before they pulled her back. She lived, but she never shifted again." A bitter smile ghosted and vanished. "I do not delegate certain things anymore." Ivy looked at the pale, precise bite marks lining his forearm, old and healed and deliberate. Those marks. He followed her gaze. From holding her through withdrawal when she woke wild and terrified. Better my arm than her tongue. The confession settled between them, heavy and tender. "I am sorry," Ivy whispered. "So am I." His voice roughened. "That is why I knew what your seizures were doing. Why I was not afraid when you bit." Her pulse kicked. She set her mug down with shaking fingers. "I am still afraid. Of me? Of needing anyone this much again." He closed the ledger softly. "Then do not promise anything. Not now. Not until your fear has somewhere safe to sit." The gentleness in that answer hurt worse than command ever had. Ivy slid from her chair to the floor opposite him, knees almost touching. She lifted her hand halfway, stopped, then finished the movement and placed her fingers over the back of his scarred hand. Warm, real, choosing. He did not move to claim more. For a while they stayed like that, breathing in the cedar and ink, while outside the palace sharpened for war. The strike came at midday. It began with bells from the East Tower, 3 rapid peals for internal breach. Guards thundered past the study door. The captain's voice roared orders down the corridor. Ivy and Jasper were on their feet before the 4th bell rang. A palace runner skidded into the records room, blood on his sleeve. "Majesty, poison attempt in lower kitchens. Taster convulsed after broth service meant for Lady Ivy. Source traced to laundry hall." "Illyra Fen," Jasper said. The runner nodded, panting. "She fled through servant tunnels. 2 guards down, 1 dead." Jasper's face went cold as winter iron. "Seal tunnel exits. Net teams, not blades. I want her breathing." He turned to Ivy. "With me." They moved fast through back corridors lined with storage alcoves and old ward stones. Shouts echoed from below, then the snarl of a wolf shifting in confined space. The air reeked of smoke and bitter herbs. At a stairwell landing, they found a guard propped against the wall, clutching his throat where claw marks leaked dark blood. "South tunnel," he rasped. "She had help." Jasper squeezed his shoulder once and kept moving. At the tunnel mouth, chalk sigils burned green on the stones. Ivy recognized the pattern from old pack rites and felt nausea surge. "Binding circle fragments," she said. "She is not just running, she is setting anchors." "For extraction?" Jasper asked. "Or to stall pursuit?" "Maybe both." A blast sounded from above, deep enough to shake dust from the ceiling. The captain's voice crackled through a relay charm at Jasper's belt. "Majesty, fire at East Granary stores inside the city wall. Diversion likely. Also, riders at North Gate report Shadowfang scouts sighted 20 paces beyond marker stones." Jasper swore. "How many?" "3 confirmed. Could be more in tree line." 3 scouts. Same number that had tracked her in the border woods. Ivy's teeth clenched. "He is timing all of it. Poison me here, burn your stores there, probe your gate while you split." Jasper touched the charm. Hold north. Do not pursue beyond line. I repeat, do not pursue. They entered the south tunnel. Torches spat low blue flame from ward salts. Halfway down, the corridor opened into a cistern chamber with dripping chains and old drainage grates. A woman in servant gray stood at the far side, cornered by two guards with spears leveled. Her face was plain, forgettable, exactly the kind that passed through rooms unseen. Alira Fenn smiled when she saw Ivy. Blood slicked one hand. In the other she held a bronze torque twisted with blackened silver and moonstone chips. Ivy stopped dead. Her wedding torque. Except it was scored now with fresh engraving, jagged and deep. Come willingly, or I will burn everyone who sheltered you. The chamber seemed to tilt. Alira laughed, low and breathless. Message delivered. She slashed her own palm with a hidden blade and smeared blood across the torque. The ward sigils on the floor flared. Ivy's shoulder, where the faithless brand sat, erupted with pain so sharp she dropped to one knee. Jasper lunged forward. Down! Too late. The sigil snapped from green to white and detonated in a shockwave of heat and sound. Stone cracked. One guard hit the wall hard enough to go limp. Water exploded from the cistern channels, hissing over burning chalk. Alira threw the torque like a hunting ring. It clanged across the floor and spun to a stop at Ivy's boots. Then the assassin shifted half-form, bones wrenching, and launched for Ivy's throat. Jasper intercepted midair, slamming her into a pillar with a roar that shook mortar loose. Fangs flashed, blood sprayed. The second guard drove a spear shaft across Alira's shoulders to pin her. She snarled, eyes rolling wild. Too late, King! He is already inside your law! Jasper pressed her harder against stone. Who? She bared crimson teeth. Read the torque. Then she bit down on something hidden in her cheek. Foam flooded her mouth. Her body convulsed once and went slack. Damn it! The captain barked, arriving with more guards a heartbeat too late. Ivy forced herself upright, every nerve screaming where the brand burned. She picked up the torque with shaking hands. The metal was warm as flesh. Along the inner rim, beneath the threat, another line had been etched so fine she almost missed it. Moon Court or Massacre. Jasper read over her shoulder, expression turning deadly calm. The relay charm at his belt flared again, this time with the Chancellor's strained voice. Majesty. Emergency dispatch from Border Watch. Kane Shadowfang requests formal audience under truce banners at tomorrow's moonrise. He claims legal right to present evidence against Ivy Nightshade before allied witnesses. The captain spat a curse. He set the stage, and now asks for court. Ivy stared at the torque, at her own old moonstone set in blackened silver, and understood the shape of the trap. If they refused, he would call them tyrants hiding truth. If they accepted in private, he would twist process in shadow. If they did nothing, people burned. Her wolf, faint but no longer silent, rose with a hoarse growl in her chest. Jasper's hand hovered near her back, not touching without permission even now. Ivy. She met his eyes, fear and fury and something harder threading together. The palace bells began ringing again, this time from the north wall, urgent and unbroken. Critical, her mind supplied with terrible clarity. He is forcing us to choose in public or bleed in pieces. She closed her fingers around the torque until its edges bit her skin. Then we choose, she said. By sundown, the palace war chamber was packed tight with voices, maps, wet cloaks, and fear sharpened into strategy. The Chancellor stood at the center table with treaty books open, wax markers lining every altered clause Kane's scribes had touched. The captain paced the perimeter, assigning wall watches and relay routes. The physician in gray, chastened and pale, argued with the younger healer over what the blood memory rite might do to a body still carrying staged bond toxin. It could stop her heart, the physician said bluntly. It could also expose the poison before every allied alpha. The younger healer shot back. Truth has weight in court when stone confirms it. Jasper stood near the high slit window, hands braced on stone, listening to all of it without interrupting. When he finally turned, every voice cut off. Moon Court convenes at moonrise, he said. Public, binding, witnessed by all packs that can arrive by dawn relay. No private audience, no closed chamber, no substitution of evidence. Kane asked for law. He will have it under full sky. The captain nodded once. North and east approaches? Hold line. Do not chase diversions past marker stones. Jasper's gaze shifted to Ivy. And no one touches her unless she asks. Every head in the chamber turned toward her. The torque in her hands felt like a live thing, blackened silver biting her palms. I will wear it, she said. The physician made a sound of protest. My lady, that engraving carries blood anchor residue. Good. Ivy's voice stayed steady by effort alone. He wants me frightened and hidden. He wants whispers of rogue guilt. He will come close if he thinks he can reclaim me in front of witnesses. The Chancellor stared at her, then at Jasper. You're proposing baiting an alpha who has already staged poisonings, raids, and an internal breach. I'm proposing ending this where he cannot forge the outcome, Ivy said, on Oathstone, in moonlight, in front of wolves he tried to bribe. Silence stretched. Then Jasper crossed the room, stopped an arm's length away, and held out his hand. Not command. Invitation. Tell me your terms, he said. She met his eyes and gave him the only answer she trusted. If I say stop, you stop. If I step forward, you do not drag me back because you are afraid. If I fall, you stand me up, not carry me away. His throat worked once. Done. They sealed it by clasping forearms, his old healed bite marks pale against her skin. The bells rang through first dark as allied parties arrived. Redcliffe, Thornmere, Halfmark, Stonebarrow. Lord Varick came too, white hair like winter frost, his mouth flattened when he saw Ivy standing at Jasper's side in plain black instead of patient linens. He did not speak this time. King's protection had teeth, and he had seen marble crack. Before moonrise, a second dispatch arrived from Shadowfang Hall under truce ribbon. The herald read it with visible disgust. Alpha Kane Shadowfang comes to petition for lawful return of pack property and nullification rights under Clause 19, subsection 3. The Chancellor didn't bother hiding his snort. A forged clause we already disproved. Read the final line, Ivy said. The herald swallowed. He adds, refusal will be interpreted as admission of theft and treason against bonded law. Jasper smiled without warmth. Excellent. He intends theatrics. Outside, the court grounds blazed with torch circles around the ancient oath stone. Wards were carved into each ring, watched by palace guards and neutral witnesses chosen by lot. The captain had posted archers on the gallery roofs, but true to law, no arrow would fly unless blood was first spilled on sacred ground. Ivy stepped onto the cold flagstones with the restored torque around her throat. The metal sat heavier than memory. Its moonstone chips caught torchlight like old teeth. Murmurs rippled through the gathered packs as they recognized it. At the far gate, drums sounded 3 hard beats. Kane Shadowfang entered beneath truce banners, flanked by 12 guards in ceremonial black. Elder Mar walked just behind him, bone staff tapping stone, face as unreadable as carved ash. Mother Sable followed on Kane's left, healer's satchel at her hip, eyes sliding from Ivy and away again. Shadowfang had brought its ghosts. Ivy's pulse slammed once, hard enough to blur her hearing. Kane looked exactly as he had on the dais at Shadowfang Hall. Broad-shouldered, handsome in that merciless way Winter was handsome, confidence worn like armor. But now she could see the strain at his mouth, the restless twitch in the fingers of his sword hand. He bowed to Jasper with correct contempt. Your Majesty, I appreciate your compliance. Jasper did not bow back. State your claim. Cain spread his hands toward the gathered alphas. Ivy Nightshade was lawfully rejected for barrenness of wolf. Cleansing was administered. Exile enacted. She fled process. By treaty, she remains Shadowfang property until bond nullification rights are completed in her home pack. The Crown has unlawfully retained her. A hiss of disapproval moved through the crowd at the word property, but Cain pressed on, voice rising. Further, Valewood interfered with internal pack justice, then fabricated accusations of poisoning to justify kidnapping a female tied by ritual to another alpha. If this stands, no pack law is safe. Lord Varric shifted, frowning. Stonebarrow's alpha muttered to Halfmark's emissary. Cain had pitched his lie well. Not mercy, not romance, but sovereignty. He wanted fear on his side. The Chancellor stepped forward with scrolls and seals. Forgery proof submitted, 6 border packs bribed, raid timings coordinated, crown seal imitations recovered. Cain laughed. Paper, ink, bought testimony. He turned fast and pointed straight at Ivy. Ask her what she is without me. Ask why her wolf failed. Ask why she ran like a rogue if she was innocent. The old shame struck like a blade under the ribs. For a heartbeat she felt 16 again, kneeling on stone while the brand hissed into skin. Around the court, wolves leaned in, hungry for certainty. Cain took one step closer, violating the neutral line by half a pace. Guards tensed. Jasper's shoulders went rigid, but he held because he had promised. Cain smiled at Ivy, soft and poisonous. Come back willingly, and I'll spare the ones who sheltered you. Refuse, and this kingdom burns in pieces while you watch. There it was, plain and public. Not law, threat. Before anyone else could answer, Ivy stepped past Jasper and walked into the center ring. Gasps rippled outward. The captain swore under his breath. Jasper's hand flexed once at his side, and stilled. Ivy faced the crowd, then Cain, then the oath stone that had judged wolves for centuries. I call blood memory right, she said, voice carrying farther than she thought it could. Full witness, full consequence. If I lie, let the stone strip me name and standing. If he lies, let traitor law bind him. The court exploded in argument. Elder Mar struck his staff for silence. The right can kill an injured bond-bearer. Ivy lifted her chin. So can poison. Mother Sable's fingers tightened on her satchel strap. Cain's expression flickered just once, with real alarm. You are too weak for that right, he snapped. You'll die before it starts. Then you should have no fear of it, she said. Jasper moved to the circle's edge, voice like iron. Moon Court recognizes voluntary invocation. Proceed. The captain signaled ward keepers. Torches lowered. The oath stone woke with a dull blue pulse under moonlight. Ivy stood before it, throat bare beneath the engraved torque, and reached for the ritual blade laid on black cloth by neutral hands. Her fingers trembled only once. Cain lunged verbally first, desperate to regain ground. She is mated to no one. Her bond is rotted. You crown a corpse and call it law. Ivy looked straight at him. You called me barren while feeding me poison in a ceremonial cup. You branded me faithless after forcing my jaw open. You sent 3 scouts to confirm my death before dawn. You sent this torque with massacre etched inside it. You put a sleeper in Palace Grey to finish what your healer started. She turned and held up the medal where every witness could read. This is your courtship gift. Murmurs hardened into growls. Redcliffe's alpha bared teeth. Thornmere's envoy shouted for Cain's arrest. Cain barked for order, but the room had shifted under him. Ivy sliced her palm and slammed bloody skin onto the oath stone before anyone could stop her. Pain detonated up her arm, through her sternum, into the hollow where her wolf had slept. The stone blazed white. Memory tore open above the court in living light. They saw Shadowfang Hall, Drums at dusk, moon ivy in her braid, Elder Mar lifting his staff. They heard Cain's voice ring out, "I reject you." They saw Mother Sable bring the cup. They watched Cain's hand crush Ivy's jaw while she gagged on metallic draft, and he hissed swallow. They saw enforcers hold her for the brand, heard the wet sizzle, heard the guard outside laugh rogue by dawn, dead by next moon. The vision shifted to wet cedar needles, 3 scouts 20 paces away, one voice saying because Cain doesn't like loose ends. It shifted again. Mother Sable's own note in her hand, initial dose accepted at hand fasting. Burn mark applied to reinforce exile narrative, secondary retrieval required. Keep jaw restraint if conscious. She bites. The court erupted. Some shouted, some cursed. One of Cain's own guards retched at the memory projection. Lord Varric stood motionless, the color draining from his face in stages as the vision replayed Cain forcing the cup. His lips moved once, silently, and his hand gripped the bench rail until his knuckles whitened. The physician in gray watched the projection of Ivy convulsing alone in the infirmary while he had recommended ending intervention, and something behind his eyes cracked open. He looked down at his own hands as if seeing them for the first time. Elder Mar staggered back, bone staff clattering as if his knees had forgotten him. Mother Sable went ash white. Cain roared and broke truce first. He shifted halfway with a crack of bone and lunged across the ring, claws aimed for Ivy's throat. Everything happened at once. Guards surging, alphas shouting, wards flaring, but he was already on her. Jasper moved like a dropped blade. He hit Cain from the side, shoulder to ribs, deflecting the first strike, then caught Ivy around the waist as momentum took them both down. Cain spun for a second pass, fully shifted now, black fur bristling, eyes mad with exposure. "Ivy!" Jasper barked, and without waiting for permission this time, because there was no time, he seized the back of her neck and bit deep at the junction of shoulder and throat. Alpha venom flooded her in a burn so bright she screamed. It was fire through frost, molten teeth racing every poisoned thread in her blood and setting it alight. The staged toxin that had sat like black ice in her core cracked, hissed, and ran. Her spine arched. Her brand flared once like a coal and then dulled. Somewhere inside, the chain that had snapped in the infirmary slammed back into place, not to bind, but to anchor. Her wolf surged up hoarse, raw, furious. "Mine," Jasper's bond voice thundered through her veins, not possession, but command to live. "Yours," something in her answered before she could think. Cain hit her mid-fall. Ivy tried to shift, and the change came in broken pieces. One arm furred, jaw half-lengthened, spine cracking unevenly as months of suppressed wolf fought to remember its own shape. She hit stone on mismatched limbs and skidded. Cain's claws raked her ribs. Pain flared, and with it rage so clean it burned the last hesitation out of her bones. Her wolf stopped stuttering and roared through. She shifted fully on the second surge, the change slamming home like a door thrown open. She came up on 4 paws and drove straight into him with a snarl that shook the ring. They crashed against the oathstone hard enough to chip old carvings. Cain was bigger, heavier, years of training in every strike, but panic had made him sloppy. Ivy used it. She took his shoulder, rolled under his weight, and slammed him onto his back at the stone base while Jasper, half-shifted and blood-slick, blocked Cain's guards from entering the circle with bared fangs. "No interference!" Jasper roared. "Court witness law!" Cain bucked, claws gouging her flank. "You were nothing without me," he spat as he shifted back enough to speak. Ivy pinned his throat with her forearm, shifted skin to skin in ragged flashes, and met his eyes. "I was dying because of you." She tore the command torque from his neck, hidden beneath his collar, black iron etched with pack control runes, and slashed his cheek open with its edge. Blood sheeted down. With both hands shaking from shift recoil, She dragged him by the jaw and forced his bleeding face against the traitor mark carved into the oath stone's lower ring. The stone drank his blood and flared crimson. By court law, confession plus blood plus witness treachery bound instantly. Chains of red light snapped around Cain's wrists and throat. He howled and thrashed, but the binding only tightened. The Chancellor's voice cracked like a gavel through chaos. Alpha Cain Shadowfang, by Moon Court witness and Oathstone verdict, you are stripped of rank, stripped of claim, and condemned to iron pits pending death tribunal. Two neutral execution marshals stepped in with silver manacles. Cain fought until the chains dragged him to his knees. He turned his head toward Ivy, eyes wild, and screamed her name like a curse as they hauled him away. Shadowfang's line fractured in real time. Half his guards dropped weapons. The other half were disarmed and forced face down by palace soldiers. Elder Mar collapsed onto the lower step, weeping into his hands. Mother Sable tried to run. The captain himself caught her at the gate and bound her wrists with healer-safe iron. For poisoning and conspiracy, he said coldly. You'll answer every line of your note. Lord Varric approached the center slowly, gaze fixed on Ivy's blood, and Jasper's bite mark, and the still glowing oath stone. When he spoke, his voice carried. I called her discarded bride, he said. I withdraw the insult before court and crown. Redcliffe votes sanction on Shadowfang and recognition of Ivy Nightshade under royal law. One by one, other alphas echoed. Thornmere, Halfmark, Stonebarrow. Even border representatives from packs Cain had bribed bowed their heads and offered testimony in exchange for mercy. The Chancellor watched it all with the thin satisfaction of a man who had seen conspiracies before. Months to build, he murmured to his scribe. One thread pulled and the whole cloth comes apart. By dawn, the verdict seals were drying. By noon, Shadowfang Hall was under provisional governance appointed by neutral tribunal. Elder Mar was removed pending trial for ritual misconduct and complicity through inaction. Mother Sable was taken to the lower cells to await sentencing. The two emissaries who had sneered in Jasper's dining hall were identified among Cain's legal scribes and arrested for treaty fraud at the North Gate. The physician in gray, shaken by what he had seen, submitted formal apology to Ivy and volunteered for bond poison training under the younger healer's supervision. Elira Fenn's body was buried without honors outside the east wall, name recorded as traitor operative. When the last witness left and the courtyard finally quieted, Ivy's hands began to shake so hard she had to curl them into fists. Jasper noticed, as he noticed everything, but he did not crowd her. He only said, Moon Shrine is empty. She nodded once. The shrine sat above the western gardens, open to the sky, ringed in white stone worn smooth by generations of vows. Moonlight poured over the altar basin where offerings of cedar and rainwater smoked faintly in silver bowls. Ivy stood at the threshold with dried blood on her palms, Cain's scratches stitched but aching, Jasper's emergency bite throbbing under her collar. Jasper waited beside the central pillar, jacket gone, shirt open at the throat, blood still dark along his jawline. He looked lethal and exhausted and unbearably careful. I won't touch you unless you ask, he said. Choice. Again. Offered. Not demanded. Ivy stepped inside, letting the quiet settle in her bones. Her wolf paced under her skin now, no longer a distant ache, but a living presence, watchful and fierce. The air tasted like rain and cedar and him. You bit me in court, she said softly. I did. No excuse, no retreat. You were about to be gutted. The venom was the fastest way to burn what remained of the stage toxin. It hurt. His eyes closed briefly. I know. I spent every day in this palace learning that no one touches me without asking first. You taught me that. And then, you did exactly what Cain did. Decided for me because you thought you knew better. The words landed. She watched them hit. Jasper did not flinch, did not explain, did not reach for her. He stood very still and took it. "You're right," he said. "I decided your life was worth more than your consent in that moment. I would do it again, and I would be wrong again." The honesty of it, no deflection, no martyrdom, sat between them like a held breath. Ivy turned it over in her mind. Cain had forced the cup because weakness was contagious. Jasper had forced the bite because she was about to die. Same violation, different gravity. She hated that it mattered which. She hated more that it did. "Don't ever do it again," she said quietly. "I won't." She searched his face for the lie and found none. Only exhaustion, and something more dangerous than guilt, the steady willingness to be accountable without asking forgiveness. She moved closer until only a breath separated them. It also woke everything. Gold flashed in his irises. "Ivy." She touched the scar through his eyebrow, then the rough stubble at his jaw, then the line of old bite marks on his forearm where he had once held his sister through terror and loss. "No crowns," she whispered. "No claims because court expects it. Only if we both choose." Jasper's breath roughened. "I choose." She tilted her throat, baring the place where neck met shoulder, where his emergency bite had already marked the skin with bruised crescents. "Then do it right," she said. "Ask." His hand came up, stopping just short of her waist until she nodded. "Ivy Nightshade," he said, voice unsteady in a way she had never heard. "May I mark you as my mate?" Her wolf surged, warm and certain. "Yes." He cupped the back of her neck, thumb anchoring under her ear, and bent. His fangs grazed first, a warning stroke that sent a shiver down her spine. Then he bit. Pain lanced bright and clean, nothing like the poison's rot. It was sharp, then molten, then suddenly deep, a pulse that spread outward in concentric waves, turning nerve endings to living wire and then to heat. She gasped against his shoulder as alpha venom entered with purpose, not violence, weaving through her blood with a hum like struck stone. The half-healed burn where Cain had tried to hollow her seemed to open and fill with light. "Mine?" Jasper's voice flooded the new channel raw with reverence. "Yours," she answered, and the word tasted like relief. "Mate?" Their wolves said together, overlapping until she couldn't tell which was which. When he released, he was shaking. A drop of her blood shone at the corner of his mouth. He looked horrified by his own need, as if waiting to see fear on her face. Instead, Ivy rose on her toes, took his shoulder in both hands and bared her own fangs. "Your turn," she said. A rough sound broke from his chest. Half laugh, half prayer. He turned enough to expose the thick muscle where neck met shoulder, exactly where a mark would hold. "I choose," he said. "I choose you." She bit. His body went rigid under her hands, then softened into her as the bond answered in a rush. His blood was hot and metallic, laced with cedar and storm. Venom met venom across the link, but hers was different. Wolf deep, newly awakened, fierce as wildfire after drought. She felt it sink into him and claim equal space. "Yours," she sent, deliberate this time. "Mine," he replied, and there was no ownership in it, only home found. The sensation that followed was not a single spark, but a lock turning. Old poisoned threads unraveling, torn places knitting, the snapped chain in her ribs reforged into something flexible and strong. Memory rushed across the connection in flashes, not words. Him counting her pulse in the infirmary, ledger numbers read in a calm voice while she convulsed. Her hand over his scarred one in the study. His grief for a sister who never shifted again, her run through storm and mud with death at her heels, both of them choosing this despite fear. Pleasure rose where pain had been, low and humming, a steady current under skin. She swayed. He caught her instantly, forehead pressing to hers. "Breathe," he murmured. In for 7, she whispered with a weak laugh. Out for 7, he finished. They stood like that for a long time, arms wrapped tight, bond settling from wildfire to banked flame. Her wolf, fully awake now, curled beside his in the shared dark of their minds, not submissive, not caged, companioned. The ache that had defined months of her life was gone. In its place sat weight, warmth, and a wild calm she had never known. Jasper brushed his lips over her temple, then whispered at her ear, voice thick with wonder, "You are not what survived. You are what rules." She smiled against his throat. "Then rule with me. Always, mate." When they finally left the shrine, dawn was paling the eastern sky. Spring came hard and bright to Valewood that year, as if the realm itself had unclenched. The Death Tribunal sentenced Cain Shadowfang to permanent iron pit confinement, rank stripped, name removed from Alpha rolls. His appeals failed 3 times before midsummer. Shadowfang Hall was broken into smaller governance under tribunal oversight. No single bloodline would hold it again for a generation. Elder Mar was exiled from all ceremonial office and sent to labor restitution at border watch posts. Mother Sable, convicted of bond poisoning and conspiracy to commit forced blood binding, received life imprisonment under healer censure. Her records kept as evidence in every training hall, so no one could claim ignorance again. Jasper's reforms passed Moon Court by supermajority. No rejection without neutral witnesses, no forced bond rights under any PAC authority, mandatory toxin screening after broken hand fastings, and death tribunal eligibility for anyone who weaponized a mate bond. Clause 19, subsection 3, became a proverb for fraud. Ivy was named Royal Luna Consort by acclamation before Summer Moon. She accepted the title, then rewrote its duties. At the Southern Keep, she founded Nightshade House, a sanctuary for rejected, bond-injured, or exiled wolves from every territory. The younger healer became its first medical director. The physician in gray served under her, quieter now, meticulous, never again suggesting a life was expendable because a wolf was dim. The captain oversaw Nightshade House security and still called Ivy "my lady" only when he was worried. Otherwise, he called her "commander" when she drilled escort lines herself. Lord Varick donated grain and stone, publicly and without fanfare. Redcliffe sent counselors trained in trauma care. Thornmere sent wardsmiths. Halfmark sent teachers. Stonebarrow sent guards who had once mocked and now stood watch at the sanctuary gates. On difficult nights, when old nightmares clawed back with the smell of metallic draft and burning skin, Jasper sat on the floor beside Ivy's chair, with ledgers open and read supply numbers in that same steady cadence until her breathing eased. On his hard nights, when battle reports and old guilt over his sister turned his silence into armor, Ivy took his face in her hands and reminded him, gentleness was not surrender. Sometimes they sparred in the western yard at dawn, bite marks hidden under collars, both ruthless and laughing. Sometimes they ruled from opposite ends of the same council table, disagreeing loudly, deciding together. Often, they simply walked the south wall as evening bells rang, fingers linked, wolves calm. The kingdom did not become a fairy tale. Borders still needed guarding. Crops still failed in bad weather. Packs still argued. But law held where terror once did, and a girl once cast out in blood-stained bridal silk now opened doors for others with her own hand. When new arrivals reached Nightshade House shaking and silent, branded by shame not of their making, Ivy met them at the threshold herself. She showed them her healed shoulder, her raised chin, and the mate mark at her throat that she had chosen. She told them survival was a beginning, not a sentence. At night, in chambers that smelled of cedar and rain, Jasper kissed the mark he had given her, and she kissed his in return. "Mine," he would murmur, smiling against her skin. "Yours," she would answer. "Mate," their wolves agreed, settled and sure, while beyond the palace walls a safer world slowly learned their names.